The year was 1878 when Genevieve Keller arrived in Salvation Creek with nothing but 3 trunks of memories and a heart as cracked as the drought-ridden earth of the Montana Territory. The townsfolk watched with curious eyes as she stepped down from the stagecoach, her black mourning dress a stark contrast against the dusty landscape that stretched endlessly beneath the merciless summer sun. Genevieve had purchased the abandoned millinery shop on Main Street sight unseen, a decision that raised eyebrows among the locals. Women didn't often venture west alone, especially not refined Eastern women with soft hands and voices that carried the lilting accent of Boston society. As she stood before her new establishment, clutching the iron key in her trembling hand, she felt the weight of stares upon her back. The whispers had already begun, carrying on the hot breeze like tumbleweeds. "Another city girl who'll be gone by winter," a gruff voice commented loudly enough for her to hear. Genevieve squared her shoulders and unlocked the door, stepping into the musty darkness that would become her new beginning. She had not come all this way to be deterred by the doubts of strangers. The shop was in worse condition than she had anticipated. Dust covered every surface, cobwebs hung from the rafters, and the floorboards creaked ominously beneath her feet. But it was hers, perhaps the only thing truly hers since Edward had died and taken her heart with him to the grave. Over the next week, Genevieve threw herself into renovating the shop. She scrubbed floors until her knuckles bled, repaired damaged shelving, and arranged the millinery supplies she had brought with her from the East. The physical labor was a welcome distraction from the memories that haunted her dreams and the loneliness that consumed her days. Word spread quickly through the small town about the mysterious widow who had taken over old Mrs. Henderson's hat shop. Some were curious, others suspicious, but all seemed to be waiting for her inevitable failure. On the morning Genevieve planned to open her shop, she awoke to find her front window shattered, glass strewn across her meticulously cleaned floor, and her newest hat creations trampled and ruined. The sight brought her to her knees, and for the first time since arriving in Salvation Creek, she allowed herself to weep openly. That was how Sheriff Aaron Reeves found her kneeling amidst broken glass, tears streaming down her face as she clutched a damaged hat to her chest. "Madam." His deep voice startled her, and Genevieve hastily wiped at her tears. "Sheriff," she acknowledged, rising unsteadily to her feet. "I wasn't aware vandalism was commonplace in your town." Aaron Reeves was not what she had expected in a frontier lawman. Tall and broad-shouldered, yes, but there was an intelligence in his blue eyes that spoke of education and thoughtfulness. The badge pinned to his leather vest gleamed in the morning light as he surveyed the damage. "It's not," he said firmly, "and the culprits will be dealt with." He knelt to examine a large rock that had clearly been used to break the window. "Mrs. Keller, isn't it, miss?" she corrected. "I was engaged, not married. Edward died before we could wed." The words still burned her throat. The sheriff nodded, his expression softening. "I apologize for the assumption, Miss Keller. Do you have any idea who might have done this?" "I've barely spoken to anyone since arriving," she replied. "I can't imagine why anyone would target me personally." Aaron helped her clean up the mess, his presence strangely comforting in the shattered sanctuary of her shop. His hands, rough and calloused from years of hard work, moved with surprising gentleness as he picked up the broken pieces of her dreams. "You're new, different," he explained as they worked. "Some folks around here don't take kindly to change." "Is that reason enough to destroy someone's livelihood?" she asked, unable to keep the bitterness from her voice. "No," he answered simply. "It's not." By midday, the window had been temporarily boarded up and most of the mess cleared away. Genevieve's grand opening would have to be postponed. "I'll have Will Cooper come by tomorrow to fix your window proper," Aaron said, dusting off his hands. "He's the best carpenter in the territory." "Thank you, Sheriff," she replied, "but I cannot consider it a welcome gift from the law-abiding citizens of Salvation Creek," he interrupted with a slight smile. "Not everyone here is a vandal, Miss Keller." For the first time since arriving, Genevieve felt something other than grief and determination, a flicker of hope that perhaps she hadn't made a terrible mistake in coming west. Over the next few weeks, Genevieve's millinery shop slowly gained customers. The ladies of Salvation Creek were initially hesitant, but curiosity eventually overcame their reservations, and soon her hats with their Eastern sophistication and flair became coveted accessories. Sheriff Reeves made a point to walk past her shop each day, tipping his hat in greeting. Sometimes he would step inside, ostensibly to inquire if she'd had any more trouble, but their conversations often lingered, stretching beyond the bounds of official business. Genevieve learned that Aaron had come west after the Civil War, seeking a fresh start like so many others. He'd been sheriff for 5 years, earning the respect of most townsfolk through fair treatment and steadfast protection. There was a sadness in him that matched her own, a shadow that crossed his face when the conversation drifted toward the past. One evening, as Genevieve was closing up shop, she heard the commotion of several horses arriving outside. Peering through the newly repaired window, she saw Aaron dismounting alongside 2 other men she recognized as his deputies. They were dusty from the trail, and there was a grim set to Aaron's jaw that made her heart constrict. Without thinking, she stepped outside. "Sheriff, is everything all right?" Aaron looked up, surprise crossing his features. "Miss Keller, just returning from tracking some cattle rustlers." "Nothing for you to worry about," but she could see the blood staining his shirt sleeve. "You're injured." He glanced down as if noticing the wound for the first time. "It's just a graze." "Nevertheless, it should be cleaned and dressed," she insisted. "The doctor's office is closed at this hour." "Please come inside." Aaron hesitated, then nodded to his deputies. "I'll see you both tomorrow." The men exchanged knowing glances before continuing toward the jail with their horses. Inside her shop, Genevieve led Aaron to the back room where she kept a kettle and a small stove for brewing tea during long workdays. She heated water while he removed his vest and rolled up his sleeve, revealing a nasty gash across his upper arm. "This is more than a graze, Sheriff," she admonished, dampening a clean cloth. "Aaron," he corrected softly. "If you're tending my wounds, you might as well use my name." Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them. Genevieve felt a warmth creep into her cheeks as she turned her attention to cleaning his wound. "How did this happen?" she asked, partly to distract herself from their proximity. "One of the rustlers had a knife," he explained. "I was careless." As she worked, Genevieve was acutely aware of his breath, steady and warm against her hair, and the strength in his arm beneath her fingers. When she finally secured a bandage around the wound, her hands lingered a moment too long. "Thank you," Aaron said, his voice lower than before. "You have a gentle touch." "I've had practice," she replied, stepping back. Edward was often ill during his final months. Aaron's expression shifted at the mention of her late fiancé, and Genevieve immediately regretted bringing him into the room with them. "I'm sorry for your loss," Aaron said, rolling down his sleeve. "How long has it been?" 14 months, she answered, turning to dispose of the bloodied cloths. "Consumption took him quickly in the end." "And you came west afterward," Genevieve nodded, her back still to him. "There was nothing left for me in Boston. Edward's family blamed me for his illness, said I should have insisted he see another doctor sooner. My own family," she faltered. "They thought I grieved too deeply for a man who wasn't yet my husband. They wanted me to accept a proposal from a family friend, to move on as if Edward had been nothing more than a passing acquaintance." "So you ran," Aaron stated, not unkindly. "I chose a new path," she corrected, facing him once more. "There's a difference." Aaron stood, towering in the small room. "There is," he agreed, "and it takes courage." After that evening, something shifted between them. Aaron began stopping by the shop more frequently, sometimes bringing small gifts, a jar of honey from a local beekeeper, a novel he thought she might enjoy, wildflowers gathered on his morning patrols. Genevieve found herself looking forward to his visits, planning what she would tell him about her day. wondering what new story he might share about the town's history or his adventures as sheriff. She began to create a hat she thought would suit him, practical yet distinguished, with a band the exact shade of his eyes. The gossips of Salvation Creek took notice. Whispers followed Genevieve at church on Sundays, and customers sometimes fell silent when she entered her own shop from the back room. But it wasn't until the Harvest Festival that the whispers became too loud to ignore. The town square had been transformed with lanterns and bunting. Tables groaned under the weight of home-cooked dishes, and a small band played lively tunes that had couples spinning across a makeshift dance floor. Genevieve had spent hours on her dress for the occasion, a deep blue creation that made her feel almost pretty again. When Aaron asked her to dance, she accepted despite the stares. His hand at her waist felt right, as if it belonged there, and for a few precious moments, the world narrowed to just the two of them moving in harmony. The spell was broken when they rejoined the crowd and overheard Mabel Thornton speaking to a circle of women nearby. Carrying on like Edward Palmer never existed. My cousin in Boston wrote that she was practically hysterical at his funeral, had to be carried from the cemetery, and now look at her barely a year later, setting her cap for our sheriff. I heard she cries over that man's photograph every night, added Prudence Weber, the banker's wife. Then comes to town batting her eyelashes at Aaron Reeves the next day. It's unseemly. Genevieve froze, humiliation burning through her like wildfire. Before Aaron could react, she pulled away from him and fled the festival, tears blurring her vision as she ran toward the safety of her shop. She was fumbling with her key when Aaron caught up to her, his breathing heavy from chasing after her. "Genevieve, wait," he pleaded. "Don't let them drive you away." "You heard what they said," she choked out, finally getting the door open. "They mock me for grieving Edward, then mock me for finding joy again. I can't win." She entered the darkened shop, but Aaron followed, refusing to let her retreat completely. "Those women don't know you," he insisted. "They don't understand what it means to lose someone you love, to carry that pain while still trying to live." Genevieve turned to face him, tears streaming freely down her cheeks. "Don't I? I came here to escape those who judged my grief, only to find the same judgment waiting for me. They mock me for crying over the past." Aaron stepped closer, his face serious in the dim light filtering through the windows. "Then I'll cry too," he said softly. "If that's what it takes for them to understand that a heart can hold both sorrow for what's lost and hope for what might be." The simple declaration undid her. Genevieve covered her face with her hands and wept openly, the grief she had tried to contain since arriving in Salvation Creek finally breaking free. And true to his word, Aaron cried with her silent tears tracking down his weathered cheeks as he gently pulled her into his arms. "I lost my wife and son to a fever 5 years ago," he confessed against her hair. "I understand carrying ghosts, Genevieve. I understand loving someone so deeply that losing them tears a hole in your world that nothing seems able to fill." She looked up at him in surprise. He had never mentioned a family before. "Emily and little James," he continued. "I couldn't save them. I tried everything, but they slipped away while I watched, helpless. That's why I came west, to escape the memories, the empty house, the sympathetic glances that somehow made everything worse." "Why didn't you tell me?" she whispered. "Because speaking of them hurts," he answered honestly. "But not speaking of them feels like betrayal. It's a balance I haven't mastered yet." In that moment, standing in her darkened shop with this man who understood her pain so completely, Genevieve felt something crack and reform within her chest, as if her heart were making space for new love without diminishing what came before. "Aaron," she said softly, reaching up to touch his face, "I think perhaps we were meant to find each other." He captured her hand in his, pressing a kiss to her palm that sent shivers through her entire body. "I believe that too." The town's reaction to their budding courtship was mixed. Some, like the Reverend's wife and the elderly Mr. Jacobs who ran the general store, were supportive. Others maintained their disapproval, particularly those who had set their sights on the handsome sheriff for their own daughters or sisters. Mabel Thornton proved especially vindictive, spreading rumors that Genevieve had come west fleeing scandal rather than seeking a new start. When these whispers reached Aaron's ears, his fury was a controlled, dangerous thing. "I won't have her name dragged through the mud," he told his deputy, Finn Murphy, loud enough for half the saloon to hear. "Miss Keller is a lady of impeccable character, and anyone who suggests otherwise will answer to me badge or no badge." The declaration quieted some of the gossip, but Genevieve knew it would take more than words to truly change hearts and minds. She threw herself into becoming part of the community, volunteering at the small schoolhouse, donating hats for church fundraisers, and offering her skills to help prepare costumes for the Christmas pageant. Slowly, acceptance grew. Women who had once snubbed her began stopping by the shop not just for hats but for conversation. Men tipped their hats respectfully when she passed on the street, and Aaron was there through it all, a steady presence at her side as summer faded into autumn. Their courtship progressed with proper decorum but unmistakable devotion. Aaron took her on picnics by the creek, escorted her to church each Sunday, and spent evening after evening in the small parlor above her shop, talking until the lamps burned low. It was during one such evening, as the first snow of winter dusted the streets outside, that Aaron finally kissed her. They had been discussing plans for the town's Christmas celebration when he suddenly fell silent, his gaze fixed on her face with an intensity that made her breath catch. "I find myself unable to concentrate on Christmas planning," he confessed, "when all I can think about is how beautiful you look in the lamplight." Genevieve felt her cheeks flush. "Aaron, I know it's soon," he continued, moving to sit beside her on the small settee. "I know there are those who will say we haven't waited long enough, that proper mourning should last years rather than months. But I also know that life is too short and too precious to waste a moment of happiness we might find together." He took her hand in his touch warm and reassuring. "I'm not asking you to forget Edward. I would never ask that of you, just as I know you would never ask me to forget Emily and James. They are part of us, part of what made us who we are today." Tears welled in Genevieve's eyes, but they were different from the tears she had shed before, lighter somehow, tinged with hope rather than despair. "I've been afraid," she admitted. "Afraid that loving you would somehow diminish what I felt for him. Afraid that I don't deserve a second chance at happiness." Aaron reached up to brush a tear from her cheek. "You deserve every happiness this world has to offer, Genevieve Keller, and if you'll allow me, I'd like to spend my life trying to give it to you." When his lips finally met hers, it felt like coming home to a place she hadn't known existed, familiar yet entirely new, safe yet thrilling. His arms around her were strong and sure, anchoring her to the present even as her heart soared toward the future. As winter deepened, their love bloomed against the backdrop of Salvation Creek's snow-covered streets and frost-laced windows. Aaron proposed properly on Christmas Eve, kneeling before her with a small ring his grandmother's, he explained, carried west in his pocket as one of the few keepsakes he'd brought from his former life. "It would honor me beyond words if you would wear it," he said, his voice husky with emotion. "If you would consent to be my wife, to build a new life together that honors the past without being enslaved by it." Genevieve's yes was whispered against his lips as snow fell softly outside, covering the town in a blanket of pristine white, a fresh start, a clean page upon which to write their story. They were married in the spring, when the meadows surrounding Salvation Creek exploded with wildflowers and the promise of new beginnings. The entire town turned out for the celebration, even those who had once whispered behind Genevieve's back. It seemed their love had softened even the hardest hearts. Mabel Thornton approached Genevieve at the reception, her expression uncharacteristically humble. "I owe you an apology, Mrs. Reeves," she said, using Genevieve's new title for the first time. "I judged you harshly without understanding your heart. When my Charles passed 3 years ago, I thought my life was over. I couldn't imagine feeling anything but grief ever again. And now, Genevieve asked gently. Now I see that love doesn't end with death, Mabel replied. It changes shape, makes room for new joy without diminishing what came before. You taught me that, you and Aaron both. The acknowledgement brought tears to Genevieve's eyes, tears of healing rather than hurt, of recognition rather than rejection. When Aaron found her moments later, he immediately noticed her emotion. "Are you all right?" he asked, concern etched across his features. "More than all right," she assured him, squeezing his hand. "I was just thinking about how far we've come, how much has changed since I first arrived in Salvation Creek." "For the better, I hope," he said with a smile that still made her heart skip. "Infinitely better," she confirmed, stretching up to kiss him despite the onlookers. "Though I wouldn't change a moment of the journey that brought us here." Their first year of marriage passed in a whirlwind of joy and adjustment. Genevieve continued running her millinery shop, which had become not just financially successful but a gathering place for the women of Salvation Creek. Aaron remained sheriff, though he now consulted his wife on many matters concerning the town's welfare. They moved into a small house on the edge of town, close enough for Aaron to reach the jail quickly if needed but far enough to provide some privacy. Together they planted a garden, built furniture for their home, and created new traditions that honored both their pasts and their shared present. On quiet evenings, they would sometimes speak of Edward, Emily, and little James, sharing memories that kept their loved ones alive in their hearts without preventing them from embracing their new happiness. These conversations, once painful, became a sacred ritual, a way of acknowledging that love never truly dies but transforms. When Genevieve discovered she was with child the following winter, their joy was tempered with bittersweet remembrance. Aaron held her through a night of tears as she wrestled with the complicated emotions of bringing new life into the world when others had been lost. "I'm afraid," she confessed in the darkness. "What if I can't protect this child? What if we lose them too?" "We can't know what the future holds," Aaron replied, his hand resting protectively over her still flat stomach. "But I do know that this child will be loved beyond measure, for however long we're blessed to have them. And that's all any of us can really ask of life, to love and be loved for the time we're given." As her body changed with the growing life inside her, Genevieve found herself thinking often of her arrival in Salvation Creek, how she had stepped down from that stagecoach carrying the weight of her grief, like another trunk to be unpacked. She had never imagined then that she would find not just a new home but a new family, a new purpose, a new love. The town that had once watched her with suspicious eyes now embraced her as one of their own. Women who had gossiped about her now brought hand-knitted blankets and tiny clothes for the baby. Men who had doubted her ability to survive the frontier now tipped their hats and asked Aaron proudly when the little Reeves would arrive to carry on his father's legacy of protecting the town. Their daughter was born as summer reached its peak, a healthy girl with Aaron's blue eyes and a dusting of dark hair that promised to be as rich as Genevieve's own. They named her Elizabeth Emily, honoring both their mothers, and added Edwina as a middle name, a quiet acknowledgement of the man whose love had shaped Genevieve's heart before Aaron had claimed it. As she nursed her daughter in the rocking chair Aaron had crafted, Genevieve often marveled at the journey that had brought her to this moment. The path had been neither straight nor easy, marked by loss and heartache, whispers and tears. But it had led here to this home, this man, this child, this life filled with a joy she had once thought forever beyond her reach. One evening, as the three of them sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the Montana sky in shades of gold and crimson, Aaron turned to her with a question. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked. "Coming west, starting over in a town of strangers, facing all the judgment and hardship." Genevieve looked down at Elizabeth sleeping peacefully in her arms, then back at the man who had taught her that a heart once broken could not only heal but grow stronger at the mended places. Not for a single moment, she answered truthfully. Every tear was worth shedding if it brought me here to you, to us. Aaron leaned over to kiss her, then their daughter's forehead. They mocked you for crying over the past, he murmured. And you said you'd cry too, she finished with a smile. But I think perhaps we've shed enough tears. Now it's time to laugh, to love, to live. As if in agreement, Elizabeth stirred in her sleep, her tiny hand reaching out to grasp her father's finger with surprising strength. The simple gesture, a child holding on to both her parents, connecting past to present, grief to joy, seemed to Genevieve the perfect emblem of their journey. They had not forgotten those they had lost, but neither were they defined by that loss anymore. Instead, they had built something new and beautiful from the ashes of their previous lives, a love that acknowledged pain without surrendering to it, that honored memory without being imprisoned by it. And as the stars began to appear in the darkening sky above Salvation Creek, Genevieve knew with absolute certainty that this was exactly where she was meant to be, not despite her past, but because of it. Every choice, every heartbreak, every moment of courage had led her here, to this perfect peace. "I love you," she whispered to Aaron as the first evening star winked into existence above them. "And I love you," he replied, his voice carrying all the certainty of a man who had found his true north after years of wandering. "Today, tomorrow, and all the days after." In that promise, spoken beneath the vast Montana sky as their daughter slept trustingly in her arms, Genevieve found the answer to every question that had driven her west, every doubt that had plagued her journey. This was what it meant to begin again without forgetting, to love again without betrayal, to build a future that honored rather than erased the past. And it was, she decided as Aaron's arm tightened around her shoulders, more than enough. It was everything.